I own a lake now. 12 acres of fresh water right in the middle of a 340-home suburban tract, not a pond. Not a glorified drainage ditch, but an actual deeded lake. And the woman who called the cops on me for simply fishing there. Who fined me $7,500 for using a kayak. Who threatened to lien my house. Well, she just became my tenant, needing my written permission to dip a toe in the water. I swear, it still feels surreal when I say it out loud. But there it is, the cold, wet truth of how a peaceful retirement hobby became the most satisfying legal checkmate. I never saw coming. My name is Harold Vance, 68 years old, and up until 3 years ago, I was just a simple, unexciting civil engineer. 40 years of drawing property lines and reading the fine print on subdivision plats for the county planning department. A man who truly understood what a boundary line meant. My wife, Eleanor, and I bought our home in the Osprey Nook subdivision back in 2019. She loved being near the water, said it settled her soul, especially after the cancer diagnosis. This lake, sitting dead center of the community, surrounded by poths, was a spot. She'd sit on the patio every sunset, watching the light bounce off the surface. She passed in 2022, and after that, I needed something to fill the silence. Something to keep my hands busy before the quiet drove me completely mad. So I took up fishing. Nothing fancy, just a cheap 40-pound kayak and a 6 a.m. routine. Catching and releasing a few bass for an hour or two. It was my therapy, my connection to her, the only part of the day that felt right. Now, the Osprey Nook is what you call a covenant-controlled community, meaning you sign up to live under the rules of the Homeowners Association. And our HOA president was a woman named Cynthia Devereaux, a firecracker real estate agent, mid-50s, sharp edges, and a conviction that property values justified tyranny. She'd fine you for the wrong shade of white on your trim, cite you if your hedge was a 1/4 inch too tall, and generally ran the place like a petty dictator. Most people just paid and kept their heads down, but I had a different set of rules. In March of 2024, I got the letter that forced me to reread it 3 times. It was signed by Cynthia, demanding an $85 per month lake amenity fee, retroactive to the day I moved in, plus a $500 registration fee for my little kayak, a grand total of $5,100 due immediately. The letter claimed this was for aquatic management, liability insurance, and infrastructure upkeep. I looked at my neighbors, realized they'd all been paying it for years without question. $85 a month didn't sound like much, but when I did the quick civil engineer math, 340 homes times $85 times 12 months, that was a cool $346. $0 a year for a lake that needed the weeds mowed around it twice a month, and maybe some fish food tossed in. I paid it under protest, because I didn't want the hassle, but once I paid, I sure as hell made sure I got my money's worth. I was out there every morning, 6 sharp, paddling, casting, enjoying the quiet, until Cynthia made her first mistake. She started watching me. It was late April, and I was just setting the hook on a decent largemouth when I heard the heavy boots on the dock. I turned and saw Cynthia, face flushed bright red, with 2 sheriff's deputies in tow, pointing at me like I was Blackbird. "That's him!" She shrieked, voice echoing across the still water. "He's violating the quiet hours. He's disturbing the peace. I want him removed for unauthorized use." I paddled slowly toward the dock, just keeping the tension on the line. "Morning, officers. I'm Harold Vance. I live right there." I pointed to my house. I paid the HOA fee, $5,100 plus $500 for the kayak last month. Receipts are in my truck. Deputy Miller, a young guy who looked completely bewildered, turned to Cynthia. "Ma'am, he's in a kayak fishing. He lives here. Unless there's an explicit criminal violation, this is a civil dispute." Cynthia leaned in close to the deputy, her voice a low, venomous hiss. "This is my lake. I manage it. And if you don't remove him, I'm going to make things very difficult for him. And for you. The deputies left, obviously embarrassed, but the damage was done. The next morning, I found a certified letter taped to my door, a $2,500 fine for unauthorized watercraft, another $2,500 for violation of quiet hours even though the covenants define quiet hours, as after 10 p.m. plus a notice that the HOA would initiate lien proceedings on my house. 2 days later, a citation from County Code Enforcement claiming my lawn was 3.2 inches tall, violating a code that allowed up to 6. The complaint was signed by a code officer I'd never heard of, but scrawled at the bottom were the initials CD. It was pure, petty retaliation. Most people would have paid and stopped fishing. But 40 years of drawing property lines teaches you one thing. People like Cynthia rely on you being too tired or too scared to check the deed. So, I decided to pull the one document Cynthia never wanted me to see. I had coffee with my old protege, Ramon Silva, the new county surveyor. Ramon, I asked casually, stirring my black coffee. Quick question, who actually owns the lake in Osprey Nook? The HOA calls it theirs, but I'm just curious. Ramon pulled out his tablet, zoomed in on the subdivision, tapped the lake parcel, and frowned. That's tract 1 for be no owner of Record Herald. Just says reserved for future county drainage retention from the original 1987 plat. It's weird. The clock started ticking in my head. If the HOA didn't own it, they were charging me for access to property they didn't control. I immediately drove to see my attorney, Clara Vance, no relation, but sharp as a razor. She looked at the HOA bylaws and the fine letter. Marcus, she said, tapping the pen, this language is sloppy. They claim access is presumed under easement, but there's no recorded easement referenced. If the HOA doesn't have the deed, or even a proper easement, every fee they've collected for 30 years is potentially fraudulent. She paused, leveling her gaze at me. But if you challenge this, they will fight dirty. Are you ready for that? I thought about Cynthia's face on the dock, the $5,000 fine, the threat to my home. I'm ready, Clara. I want to see how far this goes. 3 days later, Ramon called me back, his voice buzzing with nervous excitement. Harold, you need to come down here. I pulled the full records. The developer went bankrupt in '91. The infrastructure was never completed, the county never took ownership, and the parcel was never transferred to the HOA. It's been sitting as unassigned county land for 37 years. It's legally abandoned. I stared at the plat map spread out in the county clerk's dusty backroom. 37 years. Cynthia had been collecting over $300,000 a year on property. That belonged to no one. Clara explained the next step, a quiet title action. If no one has claimed it and no one contests it, you can file to have the court declare you the legal owner. You file the lawsuit. You notify all potential interested parties, the county. The HOA publish a notice in the newspaper, and you wait 60 days. If no one responds, the judge grants you the title. The filing fee was for $150. I filed on May 15th, 2024. I told no one. I kept fishing, same routine, just waiting for the clock to run out. The county responded on day 12 with a one-page letter. No objection to the petition. We don't want it. The HOA never responded at all. Clara had used their corporate registry address, which hadn't been updated since 1998. So the notice went to a defunct office building in Tampa. Cynthia never saw it coming. On day 61, Judge Helen Metzger signed the order granting me title to tract 1 for B12 acres. Appraised value? $340,000. Owner, Harold Vance. I drove home, made a sandwich, and went fishing. Cynthia still didn't know. It took 3 weeks for her to notice. Mid-June, I got yet another certified letter, a $5,000 fine for repeated and willful violations. listing every single day I'd been on their lake. This time, I didn't reach for my checkbook. I pulled out the recorded deed, made a clean copy, and wrote a very short letter. Dear Osprey Nook HOA Board, per the attached recorded deed, effective June 12, 2024, I am the legal owner of the property known as the Osprey Nook Lake Tract 14B. Closing parenthesis. Your HOA no longer has authority over this parcel. All previous fines issued in connection with this property are void. I will continue to use my property as I see fit. Any further harassment will be considered trespassing on private land. Sincerely, Harold Vance, owner of Record. I sent it certified mail and waited for the explosion. It came 48 hours later. An emergency HOA board meeting where Cynthia, according to the secretary Diane, waved my letter round, screaming that I was trying to steal community property and had forged documents. They hired a big-shot Tampa law firm, and 3 days later, I got an 8-page cease and desist letter full of words like tortious interference and unjust enrichment. I called Clara. They're bluffing, Harold. You own the property. They can't sue you for owning property. But she paused. If they actually file a suit, discovery, depositions, it could cost you $50,000 or more. I was retired. That was a huge chunk of my savings. Cynthia was counting on me backing down on the fear of financial ruin. I wrote back to the law firm, see you in court. Bring your checkbook. Then the harassment truly escalated. 8 code enforcement citations into week's mailbox color, trash cans visible, even my porch light being too bright. Every single one filed by Cynthia Devereaux. Even though I showed the inspector the actual county code and got them dismissed, it was exhausting. My neighbors, avoiding eye contact, suddenly had urgent places to be. I was the guy causing problems, the guy who wouldn't just surrender. But I had something Cynthia didn't count on. 40 years of knowing exactly who to call when things smell like a government scandal. And I was documenting everything. At 2 a.m. one Tuesday, someone slipped an envelope under my door. No name, no return address. Inside were 3 years of HOA meeting minutes. I brewed a pot of coffee and started highlighting. The gold was on page 47. A vote to pay Cynthia's husband's LLC, Devereaux Management Solutions, for $1,500 a month for community management advisory services. No services, no reports, just for $1,500 a month. Every month for 3 years. That's $162,000. And then there was a quote from Cynthia, recorded in a closed session after I got my first fine. We need to make an example of Mr. Vance to discourage future challenges to board authority. Make an example of me. In writing, I immediately called Trent Mason, an investigative blogger who lives to expose local government corruption. I handed him the folder at a coffee shop. He scanned the documents, his eyes wide. Harold, this isn't just a lake dispute. This is embezzlement. Give me 48 hours. His article went live that Thursday morning. The headline, Osprey Nook HOA president funneled $162,000 to husband's LLC while fining residents over property she didn't own. It went viral. Reddit ate it up. A local TV news reporter and camera crew met me at the lake, the very dock where Cynthia had called the cops. I kept it simple. They called me a thief for legally owning property I purchased. Meanwhile, they've been charging families $85 a month for a lake they had no legal right to control. You tell me who the thief is. The story aired that night. By morning, the State Attorney General's office had opened an investigation into the HOA's finances. 48 hours later, 3 board members resigned. Cynthia's expensive law firm withdrew from the lawsuit, and my mailbox started filling up with apology letters from neighbors. The emergency membership meeting was set for a Saturday afternoon. I showed up, though I didn't plan to speak. The community center was packed, over 250 people. Cynthia sat at the front table, jaw-locked, her face a mask of purple fury. Diane, the secretary who had stepped up, called the meeting to order. First item, motion to remove Cynthia Devereaux as president for cause. A homeowner stood up and read the list of causes: misappropriation of funds, conflict of interest, retaliation, failure to disclose. The vote was called. I didn't vote, but I didn't need to. The motion passed with 87% in favor. Cynthia stood up, shoved her chair back, and said, "This is a witch hunt," before storming out of the room. The place erupted in applause. Diane turned to me. "Harold, the board owes you an apology. We allowed this. On behalf of the community, we're sorry." Then she asked the question I've been waiting for. "What do you want?" I could have kept the lake. I could have charged them a fortune. But that's not what Eleanor would have wanted, and it wasn't my goal. I stood up, holding a piece of paper. "I want 3 things," I said, voice calm but firm. First, the HOA drops the lawsuit immediately. Second, a full refund of every dollar I paid in lake fees, $5,100. Third, I'm willing to grant the HOA a formal easement for lake access, but it comes with conditions. I read them off. 1. The monthly lake fees reduced to no more than $15 for actual maintenance costs. No hidden fees. 2. I retain veto power over any rule changes related to the lake. You want to ban fishing or kayaks, you run it by me first. 3. The easement is for 10 years, and if the HOA violates the terms, I revoke it. For I get to fish whenever I want, no restrictions. Take it or leave it. I concluded. They took it. Unanimously. 2 weeks later, at the formal signing, the room was packed again. The local news was there. And sitting in the back row, arms crossed, was Cynthia Devereaux, still a homeowner, but now powerless. Then, a man from the state attorney general's office stood up. "I apologize for interrupting," he announced, "but our investigation into the Osprey Nook HOA has concluded. We have referred criminal charges to the state attorney's office against Cynthia Devereaux and her husband, Thomas Devereaux, for misappropriation of homeowner funds and fraudulent billing practices. Our audit found that over a 5-year period, approximately $127,000 was improperly diverted." The room went dead silent. Cynthia's face went white. She stood up, trembling, trying to shout about property values, but no one was listening. That was the end of the war. But here's the best part, the quiet little punchline I saved for last. 6 months later, due to the lawsuits, legal fees, and the resulting divorce, Cynthia was forced to sell her home. The buyer was a shell company, and I bought the house back immediately, converting it into a rental property. She had nowhere else to go quickly, so she signed a short-term lease with me. The woman who threatened to lien my house, who called the sheriff on me, who fined me $7,500, now pays me rent every month. And the terms of her lease explicitly state that any use of the lake amenity must be approved in writing by the owner of Tract 14B. She needs my permission to let her grandchildren fish on the lake she once claimed was hers. She tried to crush me over a petty rule and ended up losing her career, her savings, her husband, and her house, all because she failed to read the property deed. So I'm still fishing every morning, 6 sharp, casting my line onto the still water of my lake. And sometimes when I see a little ripple near the dock, I just smile and enjoy the quiet. What about you? What's the most ridiculous HOA battle you've ever fought? And what kind of due diligence did you have to do to win? Drop a comment below and share your story, because sometimes you have to be the one to remind the little tyrant that property values don't trump property law. Fading sound of a gentle fishing lure casting and reeling.